This episode has two parts. Part 1, introduction to Joe, his broad views on tax consulting, and comparison to auditing. Content is for educational purposes and does not represent the view of any entities affiliated with guests. Hello and welcome everyone, I'm Jasper and this is the PB&J cast where we explore careers, ideas and unique stories. I am thankful for you investing your time to help broaden your perspective and joining me in the journey as we appreciate the process of finding and adding value in work. Today, very, very fortunate to have Joe here, a good friend of mine, talk about his experience. Just giving him a bit of a background, did a Bachelor of Commerce in Accounting and Banking. During that time, he was part of the Kedin Wall Street Club, Accounting Association Bloom. And super fun fact is that he has featured at the age of 15 years old on 2 national broadcasts because he developed an app and they called him a child genius. On top of that, he was on the show with two of his sister and his cousin, and they called him Joe's Angels. He's blushing right now. It ended up being a top 100 arcade games. It was also endorsed by the Autism Association of WA. But what stood out is that Joe was not ashamed to say that he would donate 10% of all profits to charity and that he, quote, have big dreams, unquote. So, Joe, anything I miss out on?
No, mate, that's a pretty nice intro.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
We'll get straight into the role because of his hobbies. His hobbies include drone flying and extremely passionate about tax.
That's right.
So, I think you can guess Joe is a tax consultant at one of the big 4 firms?
Professional
services. What else am I missing?
No, mate, you got it pretty spot on.
Yeah?
Spot on there.
All right.
It's been an interesting journey.
Okay. Okay, let's get into it. Why are you passionate about tax?
Why am I passionate about tax? I think I'm passionate about tax mostly because it's something that every business has to deal with, right? So the saying death and taxes, right? So I think it's a good opportunity to get in the room with a lot of businesses, and a lot of business owners and seeing how they're running their business and that. And I think I was definitely attracted to getting in the room with them, so I think, that's something that really stirred my passion for tax. I also think it's a pretty cool system. I know many people don't like to pay tax and all that sort of stuff, but it's quite an intricate system. The complexities of it and the constant developments and changes that happen every year is like constantly, the system's constantly changing. So I think it's pretty cool to be engaged in that. And everyone always talks about it. Everyone, always asks what can they do and stuff like that to improve their tax situation. And it's cool to be able to, have those conversations with people. So yeah, I'm that weird guy that likes tax.
You are, but you're also right. Everyone needs to know about tax. Even
right.
One of the first times I met Joe, I was like, oh, I need to do my tax return.
That's the first thing you thought of.
No, but that's really interesting. So I know when you say that answer, I notice there's elements of helping people, and I know you personally. You definitely have a heart for people. Definitely want to help people. But why specifically in the role of tax? Is it because everyone, you've kind of alluded to it?
Yeah, I think so. In particular with my role, I think being in that position on the tax side of things, it's usually managed in smaller firms by the owner. It's not something that, if, for example, if there's a small business and they need to do some marketing and that, the owner may not get so involved. They'll just, leave it to, a specialist to go do that. But with tax, usually because, you're dealing with a company or their business side, but you usually also deal with their personal side, and you're seeing quite personal information when you're talking about tax. So it really gets you in the conversation with the actual person being the owner, more so than, a CFO or a board member. And in my time at different roles within a big 4, I've noticed that, compared to where, in different teams where you're engaging a lot with boards and committees, it's a lot less personal in compared to dealing with, on the tax side when you're actually dealing with the owner's business, which they usually get quite heavily involved when it comes to their tax bill and their tax planning side of things. So I think it creates a lot more of a deeper and more meaningful conversation with them as an individual. So yeah, that's sort of why.
Okay.
I think, does that make sense?
No, that does make sense. That makes sense. How would you then like justify the role? I get, but how then does it translate to like, we really need to pay someone to do this?
Yeah. Look, a lot of people do think like, when they get their tax, their accountant's bill, they don't really see like the value that is in it. But I think in particular, a lot of people want to make sure that they are, appropriately doing the right thing and paying the right amount of tax because there's risks there, right? So I think to justify the role, I think it's showing that you're across the board with person's business situation or personal situation, and being able to bring things to their attention that not only in some events do save them tax or get them a better outcome, but also, protect their assets and things like that. So I think it's, in terms of the tax side, there's also like asset protection side. So I think a lot of people see more valuable in that, making sure that their homes are protected, or, their cash is protected, or shares, portfolios. And that sort of interacts with tax as well. So I think that's often the value isn't being added in, doing the tax return. There's a bit more to it that goes behind a tax return. So the value adding usually comes from how we plan for a year ahead and having those discussions with people. It's not that, they just come to us at the end of the financial year and we do their tax return. That's very like shallow in this sort of business and what accountants actually do. But in the role that I'm in, it's a lot more we work with the clients throughout the year, making sure that they're ready for tax time, and you're sort of setting up structures and making sure that throughout the year, as they do life and as they do business, as they buy things and sell things, that they're throughout the whole process, they're protected as well from, external sources and, things that could go wrong. So I think adding value really comes to, giving people a sense of security about their home, their business, their assets. I really do think that's where we're adding value. It's not saying how much tax you got to pay at the end of the year.
Yeah. I think more people need to know that, because even for myself, it's just like, tax return. But your role is more specifically in wealth management tax.
Yeah. So being the team that's in private clients, so we deal with, your higher net worths, more so because of the Big Four environment, we're dealing with the higher end and the bigger end of town that are private, but very much large enough to almost be public companies and that you could imagine. But so there's a lot more involved than just an individual tax return, because the majority of my time won't necessarily be on like an individual tax return. Yeah. It's very, structures and trusts. So you may have a family that has 5 or 6 trusts with multiple properties, and making sure that they're protected.
Damn.
Making sure that, they're putting money in the right places. It's not so much advice, because we're not really financial advisors. Yep. So I think there's a bit of a fine line there between like a tax accountant and a financial advisor, but we're more about the structure. So when I say structure, I mean like trusts, companies, sole traders, superannuation funds. What is actually behind the wealth of the actual client, and how they manage that wealth through a structure. Yeah. Not saying like this is a good, you should put your money in shares compared to put your money in property. That would be more of a wealth manager. Yeah, gotcha. So, gotcha.
Cool. How does it work? Because I would assume there's a very high net value client. How then does the team structure work? Do you just get allocated one person, or? Yeah,
so obviously, so tax time varies as well. So, a lot of people think, 30 June or 1 July, everyone starts doing their tax returns. I think a lot of people think that because, individuals will lodge their tax returns between now and the end of October. But our tax time sort of is broken up. So we do have some that go out like before Christmas for certain groups and entities. And then we have a 15 May lodgement, which is where majority of things will have to be in at that point. In terms of the team, so you're talking about more like the structure of our team and how... Yeah, so obviously at the top we have partners. Yeah. This would be dependent on the firm. Majority of accounting practices run this sort of way. So you have your partners, which hold the connection with the client. And at my level, being a consultant or, the old fashioned just accountant, that's where we'll get allocated jobs, I guess, in terms of groups, if I'm saying it in that way. So it'll be like a client group. So it'll be, a particular family, let's say, and every year you'll do their tax work. So let's say between August and October, you're working on that group, and everyone has a portfolio. So I'll have a portfolio. Naturally, at the top, the partners have a bigger portfolio because there's about 2 or 3 of them. And then you have your senior managers. They'll have a bigger portfolio. And then as it goes down, the portfolio gets bigger because naturally you're not the one like fully responsible for it. Okay. So, I would have probably about 100 entities in my portfolio, which throughout the year, being from 1 July, which is where everyone thinks it all starts, from 1 July all the way to 15 May is where I'll be working through them.
Okay. And do you do that with other people as well?
So tax, unlike something like auditing, so in a Big Four auditing, which is a lot of people think of Big Four, coming out of university, most people that step out of a commerce degree will do auditing. That's different. That's very group work. Yeah. Tax, which is something I didn't realize so much, but tax is quite individual work. Like you'll work with someone senior, which will review your work, but it's very not so much in a group environment unless it's a big job. So I do work on a big job that takes about 3 months of my year. Wow. And that yes, there's a team of about 4 or 5, actually, 5 of us roughly. So, but that's because of the size of the client and the group. Yeah. So it does vary, but most of the time you're assigned a job being a company to do their financials and tax return, then you're usually the only one on that. It wouldn't make sense for there to be multiple people on that. Okay, that makes sense. I noticed you said until 15th of May. So what do you do in between 15th May and 1st July? well, usually... Not the secret side of the bag. Well, usually work gets quite overwhelming and we don't often hit 15 May deadlines. Yeah. So usually there's extensions and there's always work that flows over that date. It would be nice to know that on the 14th you've submitted all of the tax returns and it's all done, but often that doesn't happen. And the ATOs, particularly with tax agents, they're very flexible on due dates and stuff, so they will set extensions. But funnily enough, also around that time of year, we deal with some other taxes as well. So there's a bit of resting as well, getting ready for the next financial year. A lot of tax planning goes on at that point in terms of, figuring out, for example, like where clients are going to distribute their money out of trusts and where they're, so a family trust, where am I going to send my money? Am I going to send it to my kids? Am I going to send it to another trust? Am I going to send it to a company? How charity am I going to send it? So between then and the end of the year, we sort of do the tax planning side and then get ready for obviously the 1 July year. But you've got to get all that tax planning out before 30 June and say to the ATO, this is what we intend to do.
Yeah. Wow. Right. So there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah. So pretty much throughout the whole year, we're generally busy. There might only be about three months of the year that you've sort of in a bit of a limbo. So
in terms of work-life balance, spill the beans.
Yes. Good question. Look, I think a lot of people do think accounting is 9 to 5, but I think a lot of accountants disagree with that. Look, at the end of the day, it really does often depends on the firm that you work for. I think in private practice, like in very like small firms, boutique sort of accounting firms, I think you may get that sort of 9 to 5. That's my experience of it, but I haven't really been that much in the small accounting firms. I think in a Big Four environment, as many would expect, it is the hours can get long. They're not supposed to. They're definitely not supposed to, but they do. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. I think they're built to really test you and refine you in that particular business in a Big Four environment, and that's why they're so a lot of people like Big Four employees because they know they've been pushed.
They can do it.
They've been pushed. Yeah. So I think it's really important to understand that it's not the whole year. There may be certain parts of the year that you get to go home quite early and stuff. But I think like 9 to 5 may not necessarily exist. Like personally, my work times would probably be around like 7:30.
Yeah.
I like to get up a bit more early and get to work, and usually out by around 6.
Yeah, right.
That's usually like the way I would sort of work.
7:30 to 6.
Relatively consistent throughout the year doing that.
Yeah.
But yeah, don't get me wrong. It's sometimes the year, like July is usually quite chill for me.
Yeah.
Which is weird because that's when everyone thinks I'm busy. But I'm like, July is great for me. You sort of you're quite flexible. You can do 9s till 4:30s and stuff like that at 5. So it's there's definitely a time of the year. I would say at least 6 months of the year that you will be, spending more time at work than at home. That's for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Dang. 7:30 till 6. That sounds pretty rough. And are you on the books that whole time, or is it like 8:30 to 5?
In terms of pay?
Yeah.
Look, once again, it depends on the firm.
Yep.
From my experience,
True, yeah.
it's not because it's a salary.
Yeah.
Majority of accountants will operate as a salary. Unless you're like a trainee or certain arrangements that it might be a bit different. But most professional service firms are like fixed costs, right? So that's how they run. That's how they make money, is their salaries, and everyone's like pretty much a salary. So you don't necessarily get time, like you don't get overtime.
Yep.
Or not, well, I don't. But it's I think where you can make up is they're very flexible.
Yes.
So for example, if let's say you've worked, 2 hours extra every day throughout the week, Monday to Thursday.
Yep.
Something I like to do is I like to leave the office at like 3-4 o'clock on a Friday.
Yep.
And you might get, you can work through that, or you might work from home, maybe start a bit later, and stuff like that. So yeah, I think that's where it sort of you can sort of be a bit more flexible. But in terms of like a formal overtime, tax, from my experience, tax at a Big Four, that's not really available. Yep. I know that it is in like auditing and some other businesses, but not in tax. No, unfortunately. For us, there'd be a big cost there for them.
Then why do you reckon most people choose tax? Is it the pathway? Is it the recognition afterwards, or what do you reckon?
Why people would choose tax? In terms of, I do think it gives you a good footing to step into many other roles.
Okay.
So like if you're in tax, because remember, so I might just clarify. So when you're doing tax compliance work, there's also financials as well.
Okay.
So it's not that we just prepare tax returns all day. So a lot of clients will, alongside their tax return, we will give them financials, a special purpose financial. It's not financials that will go onto like the stock market or to be released to investors and publicly available. It's very just like, I'm a small business, or I'm a family group. I want to see how much money I made, how much money I spent for my trust for, let's say, I own this property, commercial property with 5 or 6 stores on it. So yeah, we prepare all that. So in that time, you're getting a lot of, management experience on how things run, right? So I think a lot of people, so when you're putting those two things together, I think a lot of people, or for myself at least, I would look at it as, it's given me the opportunity to one day either set up my own business, because I sort of get how these businesses run. Because like I said, I've got experience in 100 businesses and way things are running. So I see how they run, and I'm involved in, preparing their figures and seeing, okay, I wonder how much this business makes on, let's say a restaurant. Oh, wow. So wages are quite high in a restaurant. Oh, but then, you might look at another, like let me think, like just a real estate. You say, oh, you can, it's not all as good as it might sound as, I own this big property, but, at the end of the day, you might not earn as much once everything's paid and you pay your rates and council. So you get to see, I guess, how things run in different sectors across many different industries. So it allows you to either, like I said, step into maybe a business of your own one day. Yep. It also gives you a good standing to advise and support, be on the other end, being like the private, financial controller of a business or a family operated business. So I think that's why people would step into it. Some people want to stay in tax for the rest of their life and will always be the public accountant, the accountant that's on the outside and does the tax and financials. But I think a lot of people will look at it as it's a good stepping.
Yeah, right.
So for the first couple, however long you feel, 5 years, 10 years or whatever. And then from that, I'll have a good understanding of maybe what business to go into or what business to invest in, or what business, I guess, to work for.
Yeah.
And a lot of people do move in even into clients of, clients saying, you've done my tax work for all these years. Do you want to come on the other side of the table and be my general manager or be my CFO, CEO or whatever in their operating business, because you understand a lot of it because you've seen it in detail and you've reviewed every transactions and all that stuff that have gone through for many years. It gives you a good opportunity to step up. So yeah.
Interesting. I see. I'm learning something. I'm learning a lot actually. As you said earlier, on big dreams. Yeah, big dreams.
Yes. Yeah, that was a long time ago.
So how would you then I would assume, and please let me know, what would then be the decision point between people when they're like, oh, I'm either going to be a tax consultant or would you say would it be audit?
What's I guess you can go into so if you're not if for myself, if I wasn't going to go into tax, because obviously tax has many different types of taxes.
Yep.
So, I'm specializing in the income tax.
Yep.
So the tax that you get from whether a company earns it or an individual, whoever earns it.
Okay. Yep.
But there's multiple different taxes, right?
Yep.
So if we're saying all of those taxes or something like auditing, I don't think there's consulting as well.
Yeah.
So you could be going into more consulting. I think, so you want to know if you were to go into something else other than tax.
You just made me realize it's such a big question. We'll break it up into two parts. The first one is if you had to pick between two different roles before specializing, just generalizing.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, tax versus audit.
Okay.
Or what would that role be that is closest to tax, or the most common role that people would decide between, and then why would you try to sell tax to them?
Sell tax over
over whatever that role is.
So if we work on auditing, so
you say that's the next.
I would say that's the next one. Yeah. Consulting. So that's sort of how our firm works. So we've got a consulting side, which is very advising businesses on whatever they want to do, right? Whether they're going into new ventures and stuff like that. It's very big end, advising the big ASX companies on ventures that they're going to take on, right? So that's that side. I don't think that would be someone that's going auditing or tax would go into, because they can, but I think that's for our firm, a lot of those guys are like engineers, doctors, former politicians, whatever they may be. They may have an experience in a particular sector, and they'll then be going and advising companies, right? So if you're an engineer, you're a consultant now, you go and advise engineering firms on how to best run and operate their business, right? So it's not something that you would probably do straight out of uni. I would assume they do have grads that go through that, but it's quite foreign to me. But if I was to say after tax, you would step into more of an auditing role. I think auditing, I have had a couple months in auditing. The demand of the job is quite intense, I think. And I don't think that's, a shock to anyone that doing something, doing auditing can be quite demanding. The hours can be quite tough. It has a very good reward after it. If you can stick by it and do it for a couple of years, I think you can really go places from it, particularly stepping into a lot of high financial roles in companies and stuff, because it gives you a really good, detailed overlook on a company, and it really trains you up in a lot of things. But I think the role, like I was saying before, I think going into auditing, you don't get a very personal view of the business and the person, because not to diss on auditors, of course.
I feel a bit of competition, healthy competition.
Yeah. I think a lot of businesses aren't fond of auditors.
Okay.
All right. So obviously, I'm sure that they're all good people.
Yep.
But I think it's a different. You're going to the business in a different sort of approach in the way that you're interacting with them, and you're checking their work effectively, right? That's the role of an auditor. You're checking what has happened over the year, and I think, I don't know, it's just a role that's a bit more. It's not personal. It's not very personal to the business, and it's also something that they don't necessarily want to do.
Yeah.
A business, most of the managers at least, I don't think would really want like auditors coming through and checking everything.
Yeah.
If you can just manage, someone just wanting to check and test everything you've ever done.
Question you.
Questions. So it's a very tough role, and that's why I'm saying that it is a good role to be in, to like really push you, and that's why a lot of like young business students will go into auditing, because it really tests you. It puts you in uncomfortable situations. It really develops that questioning mind. So I'm sort of selling it there. But for me, the biggest one is the work-life balance. Okay. In the time that I was in auditing, I didn't get to experience it too much, but I saw like a lot of the seniors and that, and it was it's tough hours.
Yeah.
And the work is also, most of the time you're dealing with big companies, and they have very strict dates on when things need to be done, so that, we all see these general meetings happening and these annual reports that go out. They all get checked, obviously. So it's very demanding, a very demanding role. And I think tax is a lot more chilled in terms of work-life balance. And I think the auditors would say the same. They think we, live in the dream, not working very much. But yeah, I think work-life balance is a big one for me. The
personal touch,
the personal interaction with the owners, because it's different. So I come across saying that because of my role being in a private client's area. It's very personal with the owners and stuff. So you don't necessarily get that in large audit practices. Yeah. And I feel like auditing for me as well is very looking back at what's happened throughout that year. Maybe some auditor would correct me, but I do feel like it is, because you're checking what happened. And in tax, yes, you're sort of doing the same. You're looking back at the last financial year and you're doing all the numbers, right? But there is a big element of our role that looks forward as well. Yeah. And I just feel like auditing doesn't get that as much.
I definitely need to get an auditor as a guest. There might be a bit of
Let them listen to this and they might get upset with me.
That's right.
I'm sure they will say that say the same
completely opposite, yeah.
They'll be like, we don't work in tax. We're always leaving at 5. That's what they'll say. But yeah, got a lot of auditor friends.
Yeah. I love how you just have to reassure the audience. Yeah. Cool. Wow, it's already been like 30 minutes.
Oh my god.
I know, right? I think we might have to do some like part 1, part 2. We can continue this, but I'll just split it up.
Yep.
So we've kind of already covered, like, you've introduced yourself, introduced the role of tax, you've differentiated tax from audit, and you've kind of tried to sell the idea. But I think now let's go specifically into your experience